Hi everyone, thanks for joining us at Brand Equity. Today we have Michael Wall, the global CEO of Mother, joining us for a chat on what makes the company so unique and also on some of the recent developments in the advertising world today. Hi Michael, thank you for joining us. Let me start right away by asking you this. Mother has been fiercely independent for the last 25 years, and we all know that makes for a good David and Goliath narrative. But talking about the differentiators like transparency or personal attention or a non cookie cutter approach, beyond these, what do you think are the factors that attract clients to independent agencies today?
So I think at the outset, what attracted clients to agencies such as Mother was exactly that: independence as a state of being, as our superpower, if you like. And what does independence do? Well, it means that it's on us. It's our work, our thinking, our endeavor that we provide to clients, and the results that delivers are on us. There's nobody else supporting it. There's nobody else kind of adjusting for it or compensating it. So I think within that, it means that the thinking, the work, the way people work is truly focused and passionate around the client's business problem. It's not to say that in other sort of setups or other organizations that there aren't teams of people there that feel the same, but it sits through the core of our business because it's an independent company and it's on us. And I think importantly, making sure that all of our people were client facing, that there wasn't this sort of interface of an account person representing the interests of the agency and the client to each other, that whether you're a creative, whether you're a strategist, whether you're a producer, whether you're a business person, you're working as a team, and that team is dealing directly with the client. There's no baton passing, there's no interface. It's open and direct. And I think back in the day, I think that was hugely innovative and marked a real step change in the way creative work was developed and the way clients were engaged in that process. So I think, if that's the sort of historical part of the story, how's that relevant today? Or what I see is, I think in an era where values, where behavior, where transparency, where creativity are more important than they've ever been, and all companies from the biggest to the smallest are striving to deliver on those values, I think an independent agency in our space anyway is, I would argue, much better equipped to do so, and has a much more long running story of doing so. And I think the market has moved back to that ideal. Interestingly, there seem to be fewer and fewer independents in the marketplace. But I think if you look at their financial performance, and if you look at their new business performance, and if you look at who they're attracting as clients, they seem to be busier than they've ever been, even during a global pandemic.
Right.
There was a very interesting sort of financial piece a little while ago, which was talking about the WPP results,
Yes.
and basically lamenting the sort of profitability and the performance of their creative agencies, and therefore the steps that they had needed to take to bolster those agencies by merging different companies together, et cetera, which is the classic kind of management business behavior of a multinational publicly quoted company.
Right.
And yet, in the same analysis, looking at independent agencies, their growth had actually exceeded the market performance. So I think obviously in talking about Mother, I'm talking about things that were done 25 years ago that were born out of independence, born out of making sure we created the best environment for creative ideas to flourish. Right. I think a lot of the values inherent in that have become more relevant today than ever before. Mm-hmm. So I think in the market sense, I don't think it's ever easy. I suppose, again, the superpower we have is independence, and in financial level, what that means is we're in charge of our own performance, and we're not reporting a quarter, we're not reporting to a market, we're not giving guidance or expectations. So yes. Our financial expectation around that as a private company was, look, ideally we don't want to lose money in 2020, but we're not looking necessarily to make a profit. We would accept break even if we could guarantee keeping people safe, keeping people's jobs safe, and keeping mothers safe. Because our view was, if we can get through that and we can keep all of our team and our people intact, we will come out of this in a stronger position than perhaps some of our peers.
Right. And just to take the pandemic bit forward, you launched an agency called Other a few months ago, and it's meant to provide new solutions to clients. So how is it different from the mothership?
So in the case of Other, we just had a team that some were already a mother, some we'd been talking to generally, just in keeping tabs on the talent and good people. And we felt that this was an opportunity, that strangely almost in a time of adversity and economic difficulty, the global pandemic, we could see opportunity, and we could see a team that perhaps could take advantage of that alongside Mother as our core agency. And so it was about the people, honestly, first and foremost.
Okay.
It wasn't about a way of working. It wasn't about a client.
Okay.
It wasn't about, now, to your question a little bit about expectations of Other, I think what we see is, because it's a great team, and because it's a slightly different makeup of the team, and I'll come back to that, but they will find their own way. They will find their own voice. They will be true to the values of Mother and the Mother family, but they will find their rhythm, their ideal of how they bring great strategic and creative thinking to clients. And by their size, almost, by being a startup, and by being a startup born in a pandemic, they, by their nature, will also attract a different type of client, we think.
Okay.
So I think we can see that building out. We do have a couple of differences in it, which I think are interesting. One is we put what we call a maker right in the middle of the management of the agency. So Metz, has joined the team, as a very accomplished high-level producer. And we think, that in the context of a leadership of an agency, making at its core is interesting and different, and leads you to different sort of horizons and energies. The other thing that we've seen that's interesting is the nature of the business that's come into Other is almost looking for kind of brand orientation as much as it is marketing execution. So
Right.
I think that, and I don't think that's peculiar to Other. I think that might just be the context for the global pandemic, that a lot of brands are thinking about how to orient themselves moving forward, how to orient themselves in the context of what happened last year within the pandemic, and diversity and inclusion, Black Lives
Right.
Matter. There were many, many significant peaks. So I think, a lot of brands are taking a long, hard look at themselves about who they are, how they are, let alone how they communicate. So I think the nature of the briefs, I would say, are in some ways more organic and in some ways more full scale.
Right. Now, you mentioned that there was a lot of project to project work happening during the pandemic. Now, pre-COVID, there was definitely a lot of project work gaining ground versus long-term agency of record contracts. So do you think that's a norm going forward?
It is. I mean, I think one of the great anomalies about our industry is we talk about all of the change. We talk about the role of holding companies, the demise of holding companies. We talk about all these big macro changes, and yet our industry is still pretty much formulated on the same basis. So the reason I say that is I think these headlines are a little misleading sometimes, but I think in the case of, let's say, retainer versus project-based work, I think they're evening out at about 50-50, I would observe. I think a couple of years back, it was still slightly in favor of retainer.
Right.
I think it's it's evened out a little bit more to 50-50. And there's a few reasons for that. The nature of brands and businesses that are in the market these days is different. If you take Amazon as an easy example, Amazon is one of the biggest marketing spenders on the planet now, with the likes of Unilever, Procter and Gamble, etc. And it operates much more on a project basis because it wants to talk about Prime one minute, it wants to talk about Audible another, it wants to talk about whatever it might be. And it's happy to come in and out of the market on that basis. So I think the nature of brands that are active brands that are in the market, the nature of how they want to go to market has obviously influenced that.
Yeah.
I also think that, and you asked a little bit where in one of your earlier questions, where had Mother found difficulties in the past? There was a moment where holding companies were packaging up effectively teams and services and capabilities in pretty significant contracts over pretty significant periods of time for global marketeers. And I think a lot of that has eroded,
Right.
for a number of different reasons. One, the nature of work has changed. Two, the nature of holding companies has changed. Three, the nature of procurement and clients and how they pay for services has changed. So I think that's been one of the other drivers for clients quite happy to look at different agencies, different services, different capabilities for different projects.
Yeah. Now, speaking of different services, you launched a media planning agency called Media in the US. And I read that it aims to put creativity first and it's got trust at its core. But what were really the reasons for venturing into this business? What is it meant to disrupt?
It is, albeit on small terms, because we're an independent agency, in
Yes.
the States. I think where we see the point for Media by Mother is in a couple of key areas for us. One is, we talk about respect, respect for the client, respect for the customer. And we feel that respect in media has sort of disappeared. So, we might put a lot of reverence or respect into the product that we create, but where we place it and how we communicate to people and in what moments and on what terms, a lot of the respect has gone out of that exchange, and a lot of that is to do with just inventory and filling up inventory, and I suppose, again, holding company media groups has spent an awful lot of time building their own kind of walled garden, I suppose, of proprietary data, inventory that they pre-buy, and then just basically selling that on to clients. In the same sense, I suppose, for us, the digital giants, Google, Facebook, are just filling up inventory. We know that there are many messages put out on Facebook that arguably are never targeted at the right people, or put in the wrong context, or have adverse effects for those brands and businesses. But it's just a wash, a sea of media. And we feel the respect has gone out of that exchange. We also know that we're talking, particularly in the States, to a generation of ad avoiders, the TiVo effect.
Right.
And we know from a legislation point of view and an investigation point of view into the transparency of media and media buying, and cookies and data and everything else, that there are big changes already happening. So we just felt there has to be a role for a media group who put the respect back into media, that the message that we send to you and place with you in the right environment, in the right context, in the right moments that works for you. So that all the time and trouble we put into the strategy and the creative development of this idea is delivered to you in the right way at the right moment. And I suppose that for us is the big opportunity. And we think we can do that, I guess, from the point of view of being an independent company again. The other piece is in America specifically, in creative agencies, it's very typical for creative agencies to have a media capability. In agencies that I've worked with over the years, there is typically, a media group alongside the agency group.
Sure. So at this point, I do want to ask you about your 500 employees. They're supposed to follow some singular creative vision. So how do you keep them driven and how do you keep them motivated? I know you've invested in learning and development tools, but what I really wanted to ask is how do you keep the communication and the ideas flowing between, let's say, the older seasoned creatives as well as the younger minds, and also between the business and the creative minds?
No, I mean, having had some good experience of working with some wonderfully talented people in India, in my days at Lowe and Lowe Lintas, and seeing, I think, some of the very best creative people in the marketplace, one of the things I always observed was the hierarchy of it almost was very, very pronounced. And I wasn't convinced that was always a good thing. I think what everybody recognizes as a employee at Mother is that the whole ethos of the company is built around creativity, is built around giving you the space, giving you the kind of protection almost to explore your creativity and your creative thinking. And that failure can also be a part of that. If we're talking about ideas, everybody's in the conversation, whether you're the creative director of a particular piece of business or the placement team who are helping out for a period of time.
Right. Getting a bit broad based now, if I were to force you to crystal gaze into the next 1 year, be it into consumer choices or brand building or consumer journeys across media, what significant trends do you foresee? Let's say those that are driven by this COVID related surge in digital consumption.
It's probably subject for a whole other call and article, and I'm no expert on it, but I think accelerating the pace of change of everything, without doubt. People being used to and expecting to interact with brands digitally as much as physically. It's quite incredible, actually, the number of brands that sort of just lived off a physical legacy.
True.
We're talking to one business at the moment which has been phenomenally successful as a bricks and mortar business, with really basically just passing traffic as its customer. It's never really had to bother too much with them. They've been incredibly loyal. The brand and the business has delighted and surprised them. But when they couldn't act in a physical way, their business has just frozen. I think the other thing it does as well is just speed of becoming a brand and a business. If Unilever, Hindustan Lever was built over a century's worth of endeavor and work and protection and sort of investment, now we're looking at businesses that can do that in a matter of years.
Absolutely.
And so they just jump through so many different cycles, and therefore their marketing services requirements are extremely accelerated. I suppose Amazon again would be an easy example in the Western world of sort of that of that kind of comparison almost of two ends of the spectrum. So I
The
suppose
time.
speed of transformation and speed of becoming a mainstream business are just so dramatically. There's quite an interesting case study for me at the moment in the States, which is the Milk Marketing Board, which is the old industry, of course, but representative, a cooperative, basically, a representative of all of the dairy farmers in the US, which is a
Yes.
huge piece of business, legacy business, versus a brand like Oatly that's about to go to the capital markets to raise probably a not
Funds.
insignificant
Yes.
sum. Yeah. So I think, it's revealed underlying architectural problems and also opportunities. It's changed the speed and scale that you can operate at. And it's changed all of us and our expectations about what we want from brands and businesses. And
Right.
that is, I guess I'm talking more perhaps in a marketing and services context, but I think it also is true in a values context. Everything is
Okay.
on display. Everything is more
Right.
amenable. There was a Super Bowl spot for, I think it was Jeep, um, in the States, that had Bruce Springsteen in it. The client shot it
Yes.
directly with Bruce Springsteen, I think,
Yes.
with their in-house creative
Yeah.
department. He had a DI to driving charge. Suddenly, a million sort of impressions, stories, sentiments are felt around the brand,
Right.
whatever their intentions were.
Right. Right.
Nothing is under the radar anymore.
Okay. Now coming to Asia, you have an agency in Shanghai and are present as a JV in Singapore. What could you highlight for us in the Asian markets currently? You could talk about last year too, how Asian markets performed versus the Western markets.
What Asia represents first and foremost is different talent, new talent that we can bring into the family. We met TSLA in Singapore some 5 years ago. We really like them. We really like what they were doing. We love what they represented in Singapore. They're the only now, I think, independent agency in Singapore in a market that's very much been dominated by networks. And
Interesting.
we just met smart people, like-minded people who had independence as their superpower. So that was a partnership that developed, and we decided to take a strategic stake in them as a way of cementing the partnership, because there's a lot of people in our industry, I think, talk about relations and working well together. I think you also need something, that connects you as a business. So that was important for us. We also did it because we wanted to take advantage of the business they had opened in Shanghai, and with us, they felt they could take advantage of a kind of increased impetus in terms of what the mother brand could bring to them and for us in Shanghai. So that's the route that got into Shanghai and how we set up Mother Shanghai. We went into Shanghai not pretending that we can crack China, because Shanghai is, arguably not representative of an awful lot of China, but because at the moment it's an important first step in, one of the world's biggest markets, where marketing sensibility has changed dramatically. Brands and brand performance is changing dramatically. Technology and the use of technology is leading rather than following these days. So it's an important economic, and it's an important marketing, and it's an important creative market to operate out of. And we found the right people,
Right.
importantly. If we hadn't found the right people, we wouldn't have done it. So we love that. Singapore, I think, is a really, it's such a different nation in a way to the rest of Southeast Asia. The role of the state, the quality of education and personnel, and in our sector, marketing services personnel, it still has become, I think, over the last few years, again, more of a hub point for multinational companies operating across certainly Southeast Asia. So it's an important talent and kind of location for us. In terms of COVID and the pandemic, again, different reactions and different abilities to manage the situation. What the highlight difference, I suppose, for us was in China from January to about June, the market stopped. Everybody was put at home. And no surprise, they controlled the spread of the virus and continue to do so exceptionally
Right.
well.
Right.
What happened in July to December was China almost caught the whole year up. And that's through endeavor, hard work, commitment, and just what China can do. Singapore was a kind of version of that. Again, I think much more clear cut and clear minded about managing the pandemic and allowing what their citizens could and couldn't do, and businesses couldn't do. A lot more support from the state, from the government to their businesses versus, say, China. And I think, in the case of TSLA and our partnership, they've come through it very, very well because of the infrastructure, but also I think because the market swung their way a little bit in terms of independent thinking, independent agencies, more projects, et cetera, et cetera. So they probably had one of their better years last year, even in this environment.
Yes. And finally, talking about India now, there was apparently once talk that Mother was considering setting up shop in India. I mean, are there any plans in the offing right now? And what are your broader thoughts on the Indian market, if at all?
In terms of current plans for India, I can confirm that there are no plans, but it doesn't mean there shouldn't be. And again, it's just about finding the right people, or being approached by the right people. We've been approached over the years. Make no mistake. I mean, we've been approached from many different points and from many different markets. At the end of it all, we're a 500-person company, as you said, and we can't do all of the things all of the time. We're realistic about what our kind of bandwidth is, and therefore what we're capable of doing. We definitely don't want to build a network. We're not trying to build a micro network or a sort of a proxy network for an international kind of structure in the way that holding companies did, way back when.
Right.
We're just interested in being in important markets where the talent is there, and there's talent that would sit well, fit well, want to be part of the Mother family. And there's no reason why India couldn't be part of that, shouldn't be part of that. It's our bad in a way that we haven't sort of mined it or developed it. And if you were to ask me what my long list is, India is definitely on it. And there's a simple reason, put to one side the economics and scale and everything else. It's a wonderfully creative culture with a rich history in marketing and advertising excellence, with some outstanding practitioners. I mean, it's as simple as that. I suppose my reservation a little bit for us now as Mother and the things that we've done, whether it's extending in the US to Mother LA and Los Angeles, Media by Mother, whether it's opening up other in the UK, whether it's going into Shanghai via Singapore, for us as a 500-person company, that's been quite a lot of work and movement already.
Yes.
For me, my slight reservation with India still, but this might be my problem, rather than anybody else's, is I've always observed that specifically in the advertising marketplace, it's still quite traditional in the sense of its reliance or the importance it places on the typical holding company network agencies. And surprisingly, perhaps in a way, it doesn't really get behind the underdog. It doesn't really embrace something that is still yet to prove itself, or that needs to learn along the way, or that might make a few mistakes before it gets it right. And I'm talking specifically through the lens of the advertising industry. So I've always wanted that hierarchy to sort of, to be honest with you, crumble a little bit, because out of that comes opportunity for new growth, new perspective, new personalities. And I think that is happening in the advertising market in India. You know, if it's not happening directly in the market, it's happening because holding companies are rearranging their pieces. You know, and WPP is a good example of that. And typically, when you rearrange pieces, some pieces fix and some pieces break, but certainly things change. I'm aware of some agencies. Taproot is one that springs to mind from a few years back, where that was an agency that very quickly was able to break out of the mold and establish its own voice and its own nature. I think it was a shame that it sold in a way so quickly. But I think there will be opportunity for teams to flourish, and Mother could be a great partner destination for those teams. I suppose the honest answer is we haven't prospected it yet, and I'm holding back a little bit until I feel there's some momentum in the market that genuinely and authentically wants new.
Yes.
It's a market we look to, and importantly in sort of advertising creative sectors, it's wonderfully rich.
Right. Anyways, thank you, Michael, for joining us. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much. Thank you.